I'm trying now to make those final corrections on my underdrawing, my light until right drawing, before I start shading. So as you can see, if you remember my other one before, I had this too narrow down here. Also, my nose was too long. I knew I didn't have enough space here, but I discovered that the problem was I'd made the nose too long. I also had the eyes a little bit too large, so I've had to shrink those down a little bit. And even though I told you guys to make sure that the eyes are in the middle, I actually had my forehead a little bit too small. So you need to make sure you check those things. And now that I'm looking at the actual photo, the digital photo, I can see a little bit of this ear, but it's going to be so much in shadow, you're almost not going to be able to tell that it's there. Her hair goes on forever, and that's going to be a bit of a challenge, but whereas when I drew the other portrait, a lot of the background just kind of faded away. Because the hair is there, you don't want to just abruptly let it fade away. I can begin to let it fade a little bit at the bottom, but for the most part, I'm going to have to actually draw it in there. Another thing that I have forgotten to tell you is to remind you of how wide a mouth is. We don't have a measurement for lips again because those are going to be different, but almost everybody's mouth is going to be as wide as an eye. So what I mean by that is the middle of the eye. So this edge comes out right at the middle of the eye. Same for this edge. And the nose as well is going to be at least as wide as an eye. Most people's noses are broader, and eyes are about an eye width apart, and that's almost exactly correct in this particular drawing. So the nose is a slightly bit wider than an eye, as is mine and most people's are. So go ahead and check that. Don't just draw something in that you think is correct without checking. The measurements that we use, again, they're just rule of thumb, so they do change a little bit. Most of them are pretty reliable. I haven't started working with the time lapse today because I realized I had some corrections I needed to make on the eye on the right. It wasn't lining up correctly, and this is why it's important to do the light until right. I actually probably started shading on it a little bit too early, so I did have to go in there and sort of erase out my mistakes. But there's nothing wrong with making changes as you go along, so don't feel like somehow you are going backwards. That just means you're making it more accurate, and that's a good thing. So I worked for maybe a half an hour more, maybe a little bit more, I'm not sure. I'm still not completely satisfied with the right-hand side of the face. I have a tendency to always have one side that works really well and the other side not as much, and I think that's kind of typical of artists. So I'm going to go back in and continue to evaluate and change when I need to change it. And my biggest issue right now is the eyelashes. If we were working in class with a live model, you wouldn't be able to see as much detail. So in some ways that's a good thing because we can look at things really closely. But on the other hand, it can be a problem because we want to include absolutely everything. Whereas if the live model was sitting there, we would just sort of indicate what's there and we wouldn't worry about all those little details. So don't be too fussy. I'm being a little bit too fussy. So that's the end of this video. There will be another one coming soon.